My wife slid divorce papers across the dinner table, right between the salt shaker and the casserole I'd just cooked, and then told me she still expected $3,000 in her account every single month. She didn't stop chewing. That's the part I keep coming back to. The fork went up, the fork came down, chicken and rice. The casserole I'd pulled out of the oven 40 minutes earlier, the one she used to say was the only thing I made right. She ate it like nothing was happening. Like she hadn't just set 11 years on fire between the salt shaker and a serving spoon. The envelope was thick, manila, already opened, already tabbed. She'd had it for a while. There's a sticky note on the last page, she said, not looking up. Just sign where it says. I flipped to the back. There it was, a yellow square. Sign here. And under the words, in blue pen, a smiley face, 2 dots, and a curve. She had drawn a smiley face on the page that ended my marriage. I looked at her. She was scrolling her phone now, thumb moving slow, the blue light on her chin. I need a better man, she said. You're not it. I've thought about this for a long time. She set the phone down and finally met my eyes, and her face was calm. Not cruel. Calm. That was worse. I'm telling you now so it's not a surprise. I didn't say anything. My hands were flat on the table. I remember the laminate was cool under my palms. Then she said the thing that froze them. I'll still need the $3,000 on the first. Same as always. I want to be clear about something. I'm not telling this to make you angry on my behalf. I've had time. I've sat with it. I can tell it straight now, but I need you to understand the casserole, the smiley face, the chewing, because those 3 things are the whole marriage in miniature, and I didn't see it until that night. My name is Marcus. I was 41 years old. My wife was Renee, 38. We'd been married 11 years that October, together for 14. I was a radiology tech at a hospital 20 minutes from our house in Glendale. I'd been doing it since I was 23. 5 a.m. alarms, 12-hour shifts, sometimes 13 if the night guy called out. I made $78,000 a year, and I knew that number to the dollar because I was the one who tracked it. Renee had a job when we met. Insurance, claims processing, decent money, good benefits. She was sharp at it. She could read a policy faster than anyone in her office. I used to be proud of that. 2 years into the marriage, she came home one Tuesday and told me she'd quit. Not asked, quit. She said the job was draining her energy. She said she needed to find herself. I said, okay. That's the first okay. There were a lot of okays. I want to own that. This is not a story about a monster and a saint. I built the road she walked down. I just didn't notice I was paving it. So she set out to find herself. What she found was brunch. She found a wine club that met every other Thursday, $40 a head, and she went to everyone. She found a photography course that cost $800 and produced exactly 0 photographs that I ever saw. She found a friend named Claudette who never seemed to work either, and the 2 of them found 100 restaurants between them, and I said okay to all of it. Okay to the separate checking account because she said combining everything made her feel surveilled. Okay to redecorating the guest room, which she did 3 times in 4 years, twice with the same paint color in 2 different brands. Okay to the gym membership she used 3 times in 18 months, $62 a month. I never canceled it. I thought that's what a good husband did. I thought you gave. I thought love was measured in how much weight you could carry without complaining. My father carried my mother that way until the day he died, and she was good to him, and I assumed that was the deal. You carry, they're good to you. I held up my end. I just didn't check whether anyone was holding up the other. Here's the part that reads different now. About 4 years in, my mother got sick. Pancreatic. It moved fast. I drove out to Bakersfield every weekend for 3 months to sit with her, and I asked Renee to come once. Just once. Her own mother-in-law dying. She came for an hour on the second Saturday, checked her phone the whole time, and said the smell of the hospital gave her headaches. She never came back. When my mother died that March, Renee skipped the funeral lunch because she'd booked a spa day she couldn't move. I told myself she dealt with grief differently. I told myself everyone copes their own way. I made excuses for her the way you'd make excuses for a child. I was so good at it that I convinced myself. That was the foreshadowing. I just didn't read it as a warning. I read it as a quirk. The house. I should tell you about the house. I bought it in 2009 before we ever married. 3 bedrooms, a real backyard, a lemon tree the previous owner planted. I put down $41,000 of my own money. Money I'd saved since I was 19, eating ramen and driving a Civic with a cracked windshield. The deed had my name on it, and only my name. Both cars were in my name. Every account that mattered was in my name, except the separate one I funded for her every month. I funded that one with $3,000 on the first of every month for 9 years. I told her I needed time to read the papers. She shrugged, picked up her plate, carried it to the couch, and turned on one of the 6 streaming services I paid for. The casserole dish she left on the table for me to put away. I put it away. Old habit. I scraped her plate and loaded the dishwasher and wiped the counter, and the whole time my hands were doing it, my brain was somewhere very far away and very cold. That night I went out to the garage and called my brother. Niles is 3 years older than me. He'd been through a divorce of his own in 2017, an ugly one. His ex took him for a chunk he never fully recovered. If anyone knew what to expect, it was him. I told him everything. The envelope, the tabs, the sticky note, the smiley face, the chewing, the $3,000 on the first, same as always. Niles was quiet for a long time. I could hear his TV in the background. Then I heard him mute it. Let me ask you one thing, he said. Is your name on everything? What do you mean? The house, the cars, the accounts. Is it your name? Is it premarital? The house I bought before we got married, with my own money. The cars are mine. The accounts are mine. Fine. He let out a breath. Marcus, do you have the records? The down payment? The deposits into her account? Receipts? Statements? Do you keep that stuff? I keep everything. I have a filing cabinet in the garage with 11 years of statements in it, organized by year, in folders I labeled myself. I have the closing documents from 2009. I have the wire receipt for the $41,000. I have every one of those $3,000 transfers, 108 of them, sitting in a folder marked R monthly. I told him that. Then call a lawyer in the morning, he said, before you sign anything, before you say another word to her. Promise me. I promised him. I didn't sleep. I lay next to her, and she slept like the dead, like she always did, and I stared at the ceiling and ran a number in my head that I'd never let myself run before. I'll get to it. It's worse than you think. In the morning, I called a divorce attorney. Her name was Patricia Okafor. She'd been doing family law for 26 years, and she had a voice like a closed door. I sat in her office on a Thursday afternoon and laid out my folders on her desk, and she went through them slowly, and when she finished, she took off her reading glasses and looked at me. Tell me what your wife is asking for, I told her. The $3,000 a month, indefinite. The house transferred to her name, one of the cars, half of the accounts. Patricia nodded like none of it surprised her. Does she work? No, she quit 9 years ago. Why? She said the job drained her energy. Is she disabled? Any medical reason she can't work? No, she's healthy. Education? Bachelor's degree. She worked in insurance for years. She was good at it. Patricia put her glasses back on and made a note. A California judge is not going to award long-term spousal support to a healthy 38-year-old with a degree and a work history who left her job voluntarily. Maybe short-term, transitional, while she gets back on her feet. Not $3,000 a month forever. That's not how this works. She tapped the closing documents. And this house is premarital, separate property, purchased before the marriage with traceable separate funds. As long as these records hold, it's not hers. It was never hers. I felt something move in my chest. I don't know how to describe it except that it was the first full breath I'd taken in 2 days. So what do? You give her exactly what she asked for, Patricia said. A divorce. And we file our own response with terms that reflect reality. You don't sign her version. You sign nothing she gives you. You let me handle the rest. So that's what I did. I signed the divorce. I want to be precise. I gave Renee the divorce she demanded, fully, without contest, because I wanted out as badly as she claimed to. What I did not do was sign her version. I did not give her $3,000 a month. I did not give her my house. I did not give her my car. I did not give her half of accounts she never contributed a dollar to. I signed a divorce. I gave her exactly that. Nothing more. Patricia filed our response 11 days later. When the counterfiling reached Renee at her mother's place, she called me. It was a Sunday morning. I had the dog on the couch and a coffee in my hand, and I almost didn't pick up. I wish sometimes I hadn't. You blindsided me, she screamed. No hello, just that. I held the phone away from my ear. The woman who slid divorce papers between the salt and the casserole, who drew a smiley face on the last page, was telling me I had blindsided her. My version had the support, she said. The house, the car. This has none of it. This is nothing. You're trying to leave me with nothing. You asked for a divorce, I said. You're getting a divorce. That's not what I meant, and you know it. You never asked for the terms to be yours. You assumed them. There's a difference. 11 years entitles me to something, Marcus. It entitles you to a divorce. You have one. This isn't over. My attorney will handle everything else, I said. Don't call me about it again. I hung up. The dog looked at me. I scratched his ears. My hand was steady, which surprised me. That's when Renee went to work. Not at a job. On a story. She called everyone. I mean everyone. Her hairdresser, who I'd never met but who somehow had my number within a week. The neighbors on both sides. My coworker, Devin's wife, who Renee knew exactly well enough to weaponize. Her wine club. Her brunch table. Claudette, of course. First and loudest. The story was this. Marcus had turned cold. Marcus had turned controlling. Marcus was punishing her for having the courage to want a different life. Marcus, who'd seemed so quiet and steady all these years, had a streak in him, and now it was out, and poor Renee was the one paying for it. The text started 2 days later. They didn't ask how I was. They asked why I wouldn't just let her have the house. Why I'd do this to her. One of them, from a neighbor I'd shoveled snow for, asked if it was true I was trying to leave her with nothing after she gave you the best years of her life. The best years of her life. I read that text standing in my kitchen and I almost laughed. The best years of her life were spent at a brunch table I funded, in restaurants I'd never been to, in a wine club I'd never attended, taking a photography course that produced no photographs. The best years of her life cost me $3,000 a month, and the best years of mine. Then her mother called. Diane. We'd always gotten along, or I thought we had. Renee is devastated, Diane said. She can't get out of bed. You're throwing away a woman who gave you everything, Marcus, everything. What did she give me, Diane? Specifically. I'd like a specific example. There was a pause. Companionship, she said. I have a dog for that, I said. The dog doesn't work either, but the dog's happy to see me when I get home. The dog came to my mother's funeral. In a manner of speaking, Diane hung up on me. Then Claudette called, the one at every brunch, the one whose meals I'd paid for, transitively, for 9 years. You're making a huge mistake, Claudette said. Renee has options, you know. There are men interested in her. Successful men. You should think about that. She said it like a threat. Like the idea of another man taking Renee off my hands was supposed to frighten me into writing checks. They can have her, I said. I genuinely hope they do. I hope they've got deep pockets, though. She runs about $36,000 a year before food. Claudette hung up, too. They all hung up. It became a thing they did. I started running the number for real after that, the one I'd flinched away from in the dark. I went to the garage one night with the folders and a calculator, and I added it all up. 11 years. The monthly deposits, 3,000 times 108. That alone was $324,000. The cards. The car I'd bought her in 2018, $31,000. The classes, the wine club, the redecorating, the vacations I funded and half of which I couldn't even attend because I couldn't take the time off, the gym, the streaming, just over $620,000. I made $78,000 a year. I did the division. I'd given more than half of my entire adult lifetime earnings to a woman who called me boring and chewed chicken while she divorced me. I sat on the garage floor with that number for a long time. The dog came out and lay down next to me. I didn't cry. I think I was past it by then. I just held the number, like you'd hold a stone, feeling the weight of it, learning the shape. The court date was set for a Wednesday in late January. Patricia told me it would likely be brief. The law was clear, the records were clean, the house was premarital, the support claim was weak. She told me to wear a jacket, to keep my face neutral, and to say nothing unless she or the judge spoke to me directly. It'll be over fast, she said. There's nothing here for them to stand on. She was right about most of it. She was wrong about the fast. We walked into the courthouse that morning, a gray building off the 134, and Renee was already there with her attorney, a younger man in a sharp suit who looked like he charged by the syllable. Renee wore black, like a funeral, and her mother sat behind her, and Claudette sat next to Diane. They had brought an audience. The proceedings started ordinary. Patricia laid out the premarital property, the separate funds, the traceable down payment, the 11 years of documented deposits. She was calm and surgical. Renee's attorney objected here and there, weakly, and the judge, a tired-looking woman named Hernandez, moved things along. Then Renee's attorney stood up to make their case for support, and he said something I never saw coming, something Renee had never once said to me in 14 years. He said that Renee had been unable to work for the duration of the marriage because of a documented chronic health condition, that she had sacrificed her career not for brunch, not for leisure, but because she was managing an illness that made full-time employment impossible, that she was, in the eyes of the law, a dependent spouse with a genuine medical barrier to self-support, and that $3,000 a month was not a luxury, but a necessity tied to her care. He had a folder of his own. He slid it forward. I felt the floor tilt. I leaned over to Patricia and whispered, "She's not sick. She's never been sick. There's nothing wrong with her." Patricia held up one finger. "Wait." She asked to see the medical documentation. The judge ordered it produced. Renee's attorney handed over the folder, and Patricia read it at the table, slowly, page by page, and I watched her face, and her face did not change at all, which I would learn was the most dangerous thing Patricia's face ever did. Here is what the folder contained. A letter from a doctor in Pasadena, dated 3 weeks earlier, stating that Renee suffered from a chronic fatigue condition that had impaired her capacity to work since 2016. And a second letter, older, from 2016, that appeared to be the original diagnosis. That second letter was the one Renee never should have included, because that's where she overreached. That's where the whole thing came apart, by her own hand. Patricia asked the court for a brief recess to review the records. The judge granted 20 minutes. We went out into the hallway, and Patricia pulled out her phone, and she pulled up something on it, and she looked at me. "Marcus, the 2016 letter. The diagnosis date. It's the same week you told me your mother died. You said you were in Bakersfield every weekend for 3 months that spring." "I was. Renee's letter says she was diagnosed that exact week, after a hospital workup here in Glendale. Multiple appointments. Were you with her for any of them?" "No, I was with my mother. She was dying. Renee never mentioned a single appointment. She told me the hospital smell gave her headaches. She came once." Patricia almost smiled. "She built a medical history during the one stretch of the marriage where you have an airtight, documented, grief-shaped reason for not being able to verify any of it. She thought you'd never check. She thought there was no record on your side." She held up her phone. "But you keep everything. You sent me your calendars, your work badge logs from the hospital, your mother's hospice records with your name as the contact. Every weekend that spring, you were 2 hours away signing visitor logs in another county." I understood then what she meant. The dates didn't line up. They couldn't. The story Renee had built required a version of those 3 months where I was home, oblivious, while she quietly suffered. But I wasn't home. I was in Bakersfield, and I had the logs to prove it, and so did the hospice, and so did my employer, and the timeline she'd invented to make herself a victim ran straight through the realest grief of my life. The one thing she'd skipped, the one thing she couldn't be bothered to show up for. She turned it into her alibi. We went back in. Patricia stood and asked the doctor's office to be contacted to verify when the records were created. She noted for the court that the diagnosis letter was dated to a period during which the petitioner had, per her own prior statements and the respondent's documented absence, attended no medical appointments with her spouse, and that the respondent's whereabouts that entire period were independently verifiable through hospice and employment records she would enter into evidence. Then she said the quiet thing that ended it. She requested that both letters be authenticated, and she noted that the 2016 letter, the original diagnosis, appeared to have been generated recently because it referenced a clinic that, per its own public records, did not open at that address until 2019. The room got very still. Renee's attorney asked for a moment with his client. I watched them whisper. I watched Renee's face go from black-clothed grief to something flatter and harder. I watched her mother lean forward, confused, and I watched Renee not turn around to explain. That was the moment Diane started to understand, not from me, from her own daughter's silence. The judge looked at Renee directly. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you a simple question, and I want you to think carefully about your answer, because you are under oath. When were you diagnosed with this condition?" Renee opened her mouth, closed it, looked at her attorney, looked at the folder. "I'd have to check the dates," she said. "The dates are in front of you," the judge said. "Your own filing. When were you diagnosed?" 2016, Renee said, quietly. "At the clinic named in this letter." A pause, a long one. "I don't remember remember the exact building. The building in this letter did not exist in 2016, the judge said. Counsel, I'm going to need this documentation authenticated before I consider it for any purpose. And I'll remind your client of the seriousness of submitting fabricated medical evidence to this court. That was the confrontation, in a way. The judge did it for me. But I had one thing left to say, and Patricia let me say it because I'd told her in the hallway that I needed to, just once, on the record, in front of the people Renee had recruited to hate me. When the judge asked if the respondent had anything to add before the recess, I stood. I just want to say one thing. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Renee, the week you say you got sick, that was the week my mother died. I was in Bakersfield holding her hand. I asked you to come. You came for 1 hour and said the hospital gave you headaches. You skipped the funeral lunch for a spa day. Renee stared at the table. You took the worst 3 months of my life, I said, and you turned them into a lie about yourself. You didn't just leave me. You needed my mother's death to be about you too. And I gave you a smiley face back. I signed your divorce. That's the only thing you were ever entitled to, and you have it. I'm done paying for the rest. I sat down. Diane was crying, not for Renee. I could tell the difference. She was crying because she'd just watched her daughter, under oath, and understood for the first time who she'd been defending. The judge took the recess. When we came back, Renee's attorney withdrew the medical claim entirely. There was no choice. The authentication request would have buried them, and worse. The judge struck it from consideration and moved to rule on the property and support. It went the way Patricia said it would from the first day. The house was mine. Separate property, premarital, clean. The car was mine. The accounts were mine. The judge denied long-term spousal support outright, citing Renee's age, health, education, work history, and voluntary departure from employment. She granted 6 months of transitional support at a fraction of what Renee had demanded, $800 a month, to give her time to re-enter the workforce. Patricia told me later that was generous, that another judge might have given 0, and that she suspected Hernandez knew about the fabricated letter and was being restrained about it. The divorce was final in March. 11 years, undone in a courtroom in 90 minutes, after the fake medical folder fell apart. The aftermath is the part nobody tells you about. The court was almost the easy part. The court had rules. People don't. The story Renee had spread didn't just evaporate when she lost. Some of the people she'd recruited doubled down, because admitting they'd been wrong about me meant admitting they'd been fooled, and people will defend a lie for years rather than feel like a fool for an afternoon. The neighbor who'd asked about the best years of her life never spoke to me again. Devin's wife stopped inviting us, well, me, to anything. A whole layer of my social life, which had really been Renee's social life that I paid the cover charge for, just peeled off and was gone. But the surprising thing was who stayed, or who showed up. Diane called me a week after the divorce was final. I almost didn't pick up. When I did, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, I owe you an apology, Marcus. I didn't know. About the letter. About your mother. About a lot of it. She paused. I knew Renee could be selfish. I didn't know she could do that. I'm her mother and I didn't see it. And you saw it for 11 years, and you carried it, and I called you cold. I didn't know what to say. I said it was okay, which wasn't quite true, but it was the kind thing. It's not okay, Diane said, but thank you for saying so. We talked for a few more minutes. She still calls every couple of months. She asks about the dog. I think she's grieving a daughter who never existed, the way I grieved a wife who never did. We're strange company for each other, but it's real, which is more than the marriage was. Niles drove down from Sacramento the weekend after court and stayed 3 days. We didn't talk about Renee much. We watched baseball and fixed the back fence, and he made fun of my cooking. And on the last night, he said, you did good, little brother. You didn't get mean. You just got accurate. I've thought about that a lot. Accurate. I like that better than revenge. Claudette made one last move. About 2 months out, she sent me a long message. It started apologetic, said maybe she'd misjudged the situation, said she felt terrible. And then, 3 paragraphs in, it turned out the real reason she was writing was that Renee was behind on rent at the apartment she'd moved into, and Claudette had co-signed, and was I willing to do the decent thing and help, given everything Renee had been through. Given everything Renee had been through. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. Renee had built a fake illness around my mother's deathbed to take my house, lost in court, and now her friend was asking me to cover her rent because helping would be the decent thing. I wrote back 2 sentences. Renee is healthy, employable, and 40 years old. I wish her the best from a distance. I never heard from Claudette again. There were logistics, too. The unglamorous machinery of unwinding a life. The 6 streaming services, I canceled 5. The gym, I finally canceled. There were tax complications from the years I'd deposited money into her account, which my accountant spent a frustrating month sorting out. There was the lemon tree in the backyard, which Renee had wanted removed in 2019 because it dropped fruit on the patio, and which I'd quietly never removed, and which that first spring after the divorce produced more lemons than it ever had. I made lemonade like an idiot. I gave bags of them to the neighbors who still talked to me. It felt like the tree had been waiting me out. And there was the grief. I have to be honest about the grief, or this isn't a true story. I missed her. Not the real her. The one I thought I married. There's a version of Renee I invented over 14 years. A woman who was tired and finding herself, and would come back around eventually, who would one day wake up and see everything I carried and say thank you. I loved that woman. I waited for her. The hardest part of all of it wasn't the money, or the court, or the lies. It was finally understanding that the woman I loved had never been in the house. I'd been married to a hope. I'd paid $620,000 to keep a hope on life support. One night that summer, I found a photo in a drawer. The 2 of us at the beach in Ventura, year 3, before she quit. Both of us laughing at something the camera didn't catch. We looked happy. I think we might have actually been happy for a little while, before I taught her that that giving was free and she taught me that it should be. I sat on the kitchen floor and grieved that, properly, the way you grieve a death because something had died, even if it had died a long time before the casserole and the smiley face. I just hadn't held the funeral yet. It's been 2 years now. I still work at the hospital, still 5 a.m. Alarms, though I take more days off than I used to, which I'm bad at and learning. I paid the house off last year, faster than I ever could have with $3,000 a month bleeding out the side. I have the dog, who is old now and slower, and a routine, and a few real friends I keep close because I finally understand the difference between people who show up and people who show up for brunch. Diane and I are something like family. Niles calls on Sundays. The lemon tree is enormous. I dated a little this last year. Nothing serious yet. There's a woman, a nurse named Joelle, who has a laugh I think about. We're taking it slow. She offered to split the check on our second date, and I had to sit with how strange and good that felt. Someone reaching for the bill instead of assuming it was mine to carry. I didn't realize until that moment how much of love I'd defined as carrying. I'm trying to learn a version where it goes both ways. Here's the thing I keep coming back to, the truth underneath all of it. I thought being a good husband meant giving until it hurt, and never saying it hurt. I thought love was the amount you could carry in silence. And there's a kind of person who finds someone like that, who sees a man who will carry everything without asking why, and they don't fall in love with him. They unpack their whole life onto his back and call it a marriage. The cruelest part is that he'll thank them for the privilege. I did. For 11 years, I thanked her, with $3,000 on the first, same as always. She slid those papers across the table between the salt and the casserole, and she drew a smiley face on the last page, and she told me she still needed the $3,000, and she was right that I'd been giving it without question for a decade. She was wrong that I always would. I gave her exactly what she asked for, in the end. A divorce. Just the one thing. It turned out to be the only honest thing I'd handed her in years. She wanted $3,000 a month. What she got was the truth, free of charge, and the truth is the one bill I'll never regret paying.